All right. Thank you and welcome. I'd like to welcome everybody to the special council meeting for Monday, May 1st. Wow, we are in May. All council members are present. Welcome tonight. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wyandot peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and of all the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Any declarations of conflicts of interest from members of council? Okay, seeing none, I need a mover to adopt the published agenda for today. Councillor Maney, supported by Councillor Guerin. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of that. And we will go into public presentations, but before we do that, we will go to our CAO, Mr. Skeet, to explain the rationale of why we're here in this special meeting. And I'd like to welcome our delegations.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. So council, tonight we have a presentation from the Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority in the County of Essex on the potential to have a regional waste collection within the county. The town of Essex recent garbage collection tender in 2022 had an increase of over 60%. Or $570,000 for the town to coordinate this service. And this cost increase had a major impact on the town's 2023 operating budget. This is a service administered by each municipality, but there may be opportunities to look at regional waste collection approach through the County of Essex. Unfortunately, this is not an issue that only affects Essex, as similar results are occurring when surrounding municipalities are going out to tender for garbage collection. Based on this trend, the CAO regional group met in early 2022. And we started to discuss options to address this issue. And one option was to explore regional waste collection, which could potentially reduce costs to all municipalities through economy of scale when tendering. This matter has been brought forward to the County Council in 2022, and the new County Council just received an update on April 19th. The recommendation from the last County Council meeting was to have the county and the Solid Waste Authority present to local municipalities to gain their support and principle to continue to explore regional waste collection. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Michelle Bishop. She's with the Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority. We have Sandra Zwiers, Director of Finance for the County of Essex, and David Sundin, Solicitor for the County of Essex. So at this point, I will turn it over to Michelle to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi and members of council. Thank you for having us with you tonight. So we do have a PowerPoint presentation. So I'd like to take the opportunity just to provide both new and returning members of council information just regarding a bit of the background of the Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority and then how we're moving forward with this initiative. So as a bit of background, so the Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority was a joint board of management that was created by the Corporation of the County of Essex, as well as the Corporation of the City of Windsor. And that was pursuant to a 1994 agreement that was created to establish, operate, and manage regional landfill, recycling, and waste diversion programs. So with the exception of waste collection currently, all the other waste programs are currently managed on a regional basis. So as you can see from the PowerPoint presentation, those are just some examples of some of the programs that we currently manage regionally. So obviously the operation of the landfills, the maintenance of the closed landfills in the region, your blue box and your recycling programs, and your public drop-off depots, to name a few. So those, next slide, please. Sorry. So those programs that are noted on this previous slide, those date back to the early 1990s. And then stemming from a bylaw that was adopted by the County of Essex, as well as the lower tier municipalities. So what's really important to note is that when the service was uploaded to the county, that was pre-amalgamation. So it was actually 21 separate municipalities that made this decision. And then you can see from that center bullet on the slide that all waste management powers were uploaded to the county with two specific exemptions, and that being sewage, sludge, and the collection of waste. So going back pre-amalgamation, 21 different separate municipalities, as you can imagine, those 21 different municipalities all had different mechanisms for collecting their curbside waste. So some of them had small contracts, others had in-house service. Some had different levels of service. So some municipalities actually had garbage collection twice a week. Some municipalities had once a week. Some rural areas didn't have collection. So fast forward to 2023, and the current state where we're at is it's down to 7 county municipalities, as well as the city of Windsor, 8 separate contracts, all being held by the same contractor. Next slide, please. So it was that County of Essex bylaw, as well as the similar bylaw adopted by the city of Windsor, that formed the language of the 1994 agreement. So under section 5, under the powers and obligations of the authority, you can see it was specifically excluded. It was understood and agreed that until otherwise determined by the parties, waste collection in the County of Essex would remain the responsibility of the individual local municipalities. But further, you can see in section 3 from the slide, the collection of waste, while it was specifically exempted, there was language built into the agreement that said basically that amendments to the agreement could be made to include that waste collection. Next slide, please. So then following the provincial policy statement that required some municipalities in Essex-Windsor to achieve certain reduction targets as it relates to organic waste, on March 16th, 2022, the County of Essex made the following resolution, and that being that the County Council advised the Solid Waste Authority that all Essex County municipalities would participate in a regional solution for the collection and processing of organic waste material from urban settlement areas at a minimum. And then you can see the entire resolution there. Next slide, please. So it was further to that specific resolution that further discussion took place at the county level. And then stemming from that resolution and subsequent discussions, the 2 next bullets were resolved at the June 15th, 2022 meeting of Essex County Council, so that the Essex County Council would direct administration to work with the Solid Waste Authority to prepare a report on potential cost savings to be realized by transferring the jurisdiction of garbage collection from local municipalities to the county and ultimately to USWA to manage garbage collection services for the county municipalities. And that further, the County of Essex direct administration to conduct consultations and seek formal concurrence from each local municipality in accordance with section 189(2) of the Municipal Act to transfer jurisdiction of garbage collection and examine the individual potential impacts on recovering fees for all waste and organic collection and disposal from a user pay system to a tax levy billing system. And it was that resolution that brought us here tonight. Next slide, please. So as a bit of a background and a project update. So following that resolution, and as your CAO noted, conversations at the CAO level, we did have a kickoff meeting in August, and that involved all 7 county municipalities. So we had treasurers, CAOs, County of Essex staff, as well as authority staff, where we advised all administration and made sure that everyone was aware of what the resolutions were that were passed at County Council, and started to develop a plan moving forward. So then just that same week was when the authority did award the processing of organic waste to Seacliff Energy, so beginning in 2025. And then from there, knowing that this resolution was before us, as well as basically knowing where that organic waste was ultimately going, we worked with both the City of Windsor and the County of Essex to develop a RFP for and issue an RFP for the review of the existing waste management, collection, logistics, transfer sites, and the development of a strategic plan as it relates to the commencement of an organic waste collection program, as well as a regional waste collection program. Next slide, please. And then further to that, we had additional CAOs meetings. We awarded that tender, and we are actively awaiting that final report. So it says April 2023. I do have their final report in our hands, so it will be going out shortly to both the CAOs groups as well as to the authority board. So what we are looking to do is, I say target spring 2023. I recognize that it is May 1st, but we are looking to get a decision from the City of Windsor as well as the county municipalities shortly as it relates to this program. And then regardless of what the decision of county council is and by the local municipalities, we will be putting an RFT out for collection services in the near future. Next slide, please. So even in absence of that final consultant's report, administration has identified, several benefits potentially to the regionalization of waste collection. So currently, the waste collection contracts are negotiated and held at the local level. So your administrative staff at each of the municipalities, they currently create and they release those procurement documents. They manage the operational and financial components of those contracts, and they provide the customer service to the residents. The terms and pricing range from anywhere from about $650,000 to over $1.7 million, believe it or not. And most of those contracts are either operating through extension contracts and expired in 2022, and some of them range to an expiration date of 2027. As your CAO did note, recent tendering results do indicate significant contract increases, some up to 100 to 125%. And what's important to note there is that was previous to any of the inflationary pressures that municipalities have seen over the last 8 to 10 months. So those are contracts that were actually procured and awarded about a year ago in some cases. Next slide, please. So just to summarize some of the considerations for council. So, when we're looking at the economies of scale, so we are looking at the procurement. So while we can't predict exactly what the financial impact would be, particularly in these uncertain inflationary times, the waste sector is still actually suffering from some supply chain issues with the delivery of trucks. And with staffing and service level impacts. We do know that procuring for a greater volume of waste will certainly drive competition in the marketplace. So if you, for example, we look at the entire region as a whole, the county municipalities landfill approximately 55,000 metric tons per year, with the City of Windsor doing about the same. So over 100,000 metric tons of residential waste is collected and landfilled per year. So when we're looking at potentially looking to procure 50,000+ tons versus say 5,000 tons, it is a challenge because you're not getting that competition in the marketplace. And so when you look at these contractors, it is a very large capital investment in order to have these contractors come in and mobilize in the area and set up shop, if you will. So what ultimately happens is there is very little competition in the market, and that drives, either very low amount of bids or one bid, or therefore contractors don't sharpen their pencil because there is that lack of competition, and they know that there's likely not going to be a lot of competition for 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 tons. So we do know that the larger volume contracts would attract more attention. As well as we would be looking to procure collection for that organic waste, so that again, it's another volume driven procurement. And then what we do know is the removal of specific municipal boundaries will also lead to route efficiencies and optimization. So currently in your municipality, you may have a collection vehicle that goes out once and does a loop, if you will, goes back to the regional landfill. They may empty that collection vehicle, and then they go out and then they collect, say, from another 100 or 300 houses because they are full, but then they're not full on the second trip. So by eliminating some of those boundaries can lead to that route optimization and allow for collectors to be a little bit more efficient and therefore potentially drive that cost down. So our goal would obviously to be align contracts to a unified term. And we would be looking at any of the municipalities that have those contracts that don't expire into 2027, if it's the will of councils. We'd be looking at seeing if those contracts could be transferred to the Solid Waste Authority. So looking at what that contract language looks like and to see if there's an ability to get that moved over. And can existing contracts be exited? So are there clauses built into your contracts that allows for an early exit without any penalty? So we would be looking at that. So then obviously we look at streamlining the service delivery and improving administration efficiencies. So when it comes to contract management, customer service, finance, so we're, the customer service response moved to the Solid Waste Authority, and then utilizing our existing communication plans and our public education. And if you will, realizing that many of those calls already come into us, we do create your waste collection calendar. We have the What Goes Where app, and that we try to promote those collection schedules. But currently, because a lot of the waste calls go into each individual municipality, it's hard for us to target really what those calls are. What are those constant complaints? What are those rubs, if you will, of the residents? By having a centralized customer service, it allows us to really do that targeted P&E. It also allows us, if we're seeing contamination issues, or we're seeing, set out problems, people aren't, setting out the material as per, the guidelines, it allows us to do that targeted response. It allows, contract negotiation once instead of 7 times over. And then that administrative capacity regained at your local level. So your contract management, your customer service, and right down to your finance staff, and monitoring those tonnages and how it compares to your budget. If not. Next slide, please. So the other opportunity that we would have by regionalization would be standardizing the service levels, so that collection of frequency. So any standardized service levels, such as, if there was bag limits, if that was the decision of council, timing of collection, additional services. So aligning that bulk collection, those Christmas trees, bulk items, if you will, yard waste, things of that nature. So it's the opportunity to standardize those service levels. And then incentivizing those greener household practices. So obviously the frequency of collection linking to organics, and then, as I noted, leveraging those P&E campaigns, and then tracking those service statistics to drive engagement and program improvement. So by regionalizing into all-in-one service, then it gives us the opportunity to really gain that understanding and target where we could improve the services. But what's really important is that if this is the change and this is the direction of councils, this is not a handoff, if you will. This will take a municipal working group. This will take involvement by your administration to ensure success in this program. So just making sure that council's aware that your administration will be intimately involved in the rollout and transfer of this program. And we certainly would want to make sure that the residents have as little impact as they can. And that's really where we need the buy-in, if you will, from your administration. So your staff have already provided us with a lot of information, and as far as the strategic plan that's being created, and I thank your administration for providing us with contract information, contract details. Basically, we asked them everything from how much they estimated their staff time to be, so that we could gather some data. And, acknowledging that there's going to be differences in all those collection contracts. And our goal would be to basically identify those differences so that we could best determine how to align them. And I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to turn over to David, and he's going to walk through the legal.
So good evening, Mayor Bondi and members of council, administration. Thanks for having us tonight. So as Michelle just mentioned, we're going to need involvement from the local municipalities as well. And so this process starts off by the county bringing a bylaw, but then it requires a buy-in by the various local municipalities. So over the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through the relevant sections of the Municipal Act. But basically it starts off with the county bringing a bylaw, and then a majority of the locals bringing a bylaw as well. So Our starting point will be repealing bylaw number 2847 at the county level, which Michelle already walked you through. That'll be starting point, and then replacing it with a new bylaw that will come into effect once the required number of local municipalities have signed off on it as well. So next slide, please. So sections 189, excuse me, 189 and 190 are the relevant sections. And so what happens initially is, again, the upper tier brings that bylaw, and then we'll go to the next slide. And once that bylaw is brought, then it requires what we've been calling at the county level when we've been updating county council on this, we call it a triple majority. So it requires both a majority of the members of county council, which are comprised of obviously the mayors, deputy mayors of the local municipalities. So it requires a majority of county council. And then it requires a majority, so at least 4 of the 7 local municipalities. And those 4 out of 7, if only 4 out of 7 would vote in favor, has to comprise a majority of the electors. And so presumably if 3 of the larger local municipalities didn't vote in favor, it still wouldn't pass. And I believe the clerk for the county has already reached out to the clerks of the locals to find out the number of electors so we can determine what that magic number is. Okay. Next slide, please. So oddly enough, section 189 sub 3 provides that once it's passed up, there'd be no repeal and it's passed up forever, but that's not really true because then section 191 provides for provisions for local municipalities to download services back to the local municipality should they choose to do so, with a very similar framework being in place. So if at some point in the future was decided that no, garbage collection should be local again, there's a process in section 191 that would allow for that. Next slide, please. 190 just provides for what happens once that bylaw is passed, and basically once it's passed and the required number of the locals comprising a majority of the electors passes it, then it's the upper tier that has the authority the local used to have. Next slide. Just more transitional provisions there that were provided for your review. Nothing really to say on it. It speaks for itself. And then next slide, I'll walk you through the next steps. And so I was hoping to have this out to the CAO group last week. It's likely going in the next day or two instead. So the first thing will be the county passing a bylaw. We're going to pass that by the CAO group first, who will then presumably review internally as needed and provide comments back. We don't want to bring a bylaw at the county level that hasn't been at least agreed to in principle by the local municipalities administrations. So we'll do that first. And then once that happens, it will be passed at the county level. And then presumably over time, the locals will sign off on it as well. We'll eventually get that triple majority we need. At that point in time, so it's presuming that it passes, then we would, the county presumably would contract with the authority to handle the garbage collection on the county's behalf, and there'd be a billing mechanism that Ms. Weirs will speak to momentarily. But we'd have to then bring an amendment to the USWA agreement potentially. Direction would have to be given to the authority to stop invoicing your local municipalities and invoice the county instead. And then the authority would need to revise its operational plan and obtain both city and county approval. So there's a provision in the authority agreement from 1994 that says that any operational plan, budgetary plan, has to get buy-in from both the county and the city. Next slide, please. So, and likewise, if the consensus is reached that we're not going to proceed with regional waste, there's still some steps that need to be taken because based on the current direction from county council and city council to the authority's been tasked with pursuing a regional approach to organics collection in any event. So this would be provisions that would need to be dealt with if regional waste is not handled in its totality, because the current direction is to at least pursue organics waste on a regional basis. And with that, I will hand the next slide off to Ms. Weirs for the funding model options.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi, and through you to council this evening. So understandably, there's been a great deal of interest in the mechanics of how this will be funded or paid for. And I do want to preface my comments this evening that there has been no decision made or recommendation made on which funding model to choose. My presentation this evening is to provide a response to County Council's direction to administration on investigating what options are available. So currently, all County Council services are collected on a weighted assessment or a general basis. But there are other ways to collect for services, and I'm sure this council is very familiar with some of those other options. So in terms of user fees, you most might be familiar with water or wastewater or recreation services. So there are a number of ways that municipalities can collect for the cost of a service. If there is support to move to a regional waste collection, we in theory then would take all of the costs associated with your regional waste and take it off of your local budget and move it up to the counties. So my discussion this evening is around those costs that you're familiar with at your local level. So the cost of your contract, as Michelle explained as well, there may be administrative costs in terms of managing those contracts, perhaps customer service impacts to your staff in answering phone calls from residents. And you may also incur additional costs if there's follow-up work by your own in-house staff to deal with other waste collection matters outside of the cost of your contract. So those are all of the costs potentially that would move from your budget and move up to the county's or regional system. Now, this slide attempts to unpack kind of the two general categories of collection models. So we have a user fee-based model as well as a general levy based model. So on a user fee, it is a very clear link between the service and the cost to provide that service. And often a user fee model will also incentivize folks to have a bit of an environmentally friendly mind to their household practices. And we think of this often too when we're thinking of water or wastewater. If you want a smaller water or wastewater bill, you turn your tap on less frequently. So similar to a waste collection system that is user fee based, the more you can tie it to consumption, the more you incentivize folks to really think about what they're putting at the curb. A user fee model also typically is supported where services are charged only to those who have access to the service. So if you have a residential base that or property owner base that only some of whom have access to a service, a user fee model really lends well because you're not charging folks who would never be able to use the service otherwise. Conversely, a general levy-based system shifts that allocation off of that user or consumption model and moves more towards an ability to pay model. So in theory, the higher your property value, the more higher your weighted assessment is, and the more you would share in the cost of that particular service. And finally, that general levy supported service is also a model that's adopted when everybody in your municipality has access to a service instead of just a subset. So in order to decide on which model or hybrid model makes the most sense, I refer back to some of the comments that Michelle made in terms of next steps and a working group that needs to be established. So first, the hurdle is making sure that we have regional support to move waste collection from the local to the upper tier level. Once we've covered that, then we do really need to determine what the level of service will be. What does that standardized service look like? And most importantly, who will have access to it? Once we have answers to those questions, then we'll be able to better see where on this fee model spectrum we fall and be able to make a educated recommendation to County Council on which method makes sense based on the circumstance. So still some work to go, but the intent of this funding model slide is really just to give Council and the public some understanding of what options might be available and in theory, what principles are associated with each. And with that, I'll hand it back to Michelle.
Thank you, Sandra. So I'm just going to take a moment, if you want to the next slide, just to go through the next steps. So back last week, we, through the CAO working group, identified that it was very important to bring the matter back before County Council, acknowledging that the resolutions that were made were by the previous council and there were many new faces at County Council. So we wanted to take the opportunity to make sure that all members were aware of the initiative and had an opportunity to provide input and ask questions. So we did that on April 19th. And at that meeting, County Council did reconfirm its commitment to the regional approach to waste management. So allowed us to know that it was still a commitment of County Council and that we could move forward with coming to see all the individual councils. So from there, as David noted, we will be circulating the draft county bylaw to all the municipalities so that your administration will be able to provide input. Like he noted, we want to make sure that administration has the opportunity to see those proposed bylaws before it goes back to county council. And then identifying any additional information required by both the Solid Waste Authority and the county. So, looking to find out if anyone has any more information that would help and aid in their decision. Why we're here tonight, individual meetings at municipalities, if that is the wish. And so we have reached out and offered to attend any councils that wish to have us here. And then after that is done, we will be looking and circling back regarding the timing of the reports to local councils. So we'll be looking to find when your administration will be bringing that bylaw forward. And with that, that's the end of our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. It almost feels like deja vu a little bit, but it's good. It's good. The second time it sinks in even more. So I have some questions myself, but we'll see if there's any questions from members of council to our delegation. Councilor McGuire, please.
Thank you, through the chair. I just have a couple questions in regards to the standard service levels, just because I know that there are some municipalities or the city of Windsor who have lower standards than what we have. So they can only collect so many bags of garbage per household. Will our municipality have an opportunity to say what service standard we want and how much input do we get in that, or is it up to the county?
So that's really one of the key tasks of that municipal working group. So we do have, we've been able to collect all of the regional local municipalities contracts. What's kind of nice to see is that the 7 local municipalities are fairly in line with what their level of service is. So, they currently, if they do have bag limits, they are, in excess of 3 or 4 bag limits. There is only one municipality that has a hard-sided container program, but even that being a hard-sided container program, there's no restrictions on those numbers of containers. All 7 local municipalities have a bulk collection program. Some of them look a little bit different. Some can put out bulk collection, unlimited number of items every week. Others, for example, are limited to 2 items per set out. So, that still allows them 8 bulk items a month, if you will. Other municipalities we've identified have had say they have more leaf and yard waste collection than other municipalities. So what we would be doing is really looking to see what those standardized service levels are. It is certainly not our intention of, pulling back on service levels. But what we would need to do is also potentially identify, and we called it the a la carte items. So if it's determined that every municipality has 10 leaf and yard waste collection days, but a certain municipality has 14, and they potentially want to keep those 14 leaf and yard waste days, then that's an opportunity for our discuss. And then maybe it's like an a la carte program. If a municipality wants to have a couple more, that's kind of outside of that standardized service. So we would try to, the goal ultimately, from a resident standpoint, it would be nice if everyone had the same service, but we would be looking at kind of identifying those outliers, if you will, and then having that discussion at an administrative level.
Sorry, through the chair, I forgot to turn my mic off. Once the rollout and the transfer is done and all the municipalities are happy, let's say 5-7 years down the road, you need to change the level of service. Will the municipality have a say in the change, or is it just the level of services changed and we are stuck with whatever you or the county decides?
So first of all, any changes of the level of service would have to go through the authority board as a starting point. So there are members of county council that are on the authority board of directors. So therefore, any proposed changes would have to go through there. But then even, more importantly, as David indicated when he was doing his slide, any operational budgets are required to have both the County of Essex and the City of Windsor approval. So your mayor and deputy mayor have had the opportunity to have a presentation from the Solid Waste Authority seeking approval of that operational plan and budget. And those service levels are contained in that operational plan and budget. And then they would obviously have a veto at that point as well.
Answer. Traditionally, we've sent marching orders from this council to the mayor and the deputy mayor, and they have executed those on our behalf. Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Your Mayor Bondi. Excellent questions, Katie, because I kind of had the same ones. Commercially, that would be the same idea. You'd look at it the same way for all the commercial businesses as well, I would assume. And having said that, you've compared the residential, the commercial pickups generally fall in line amongst the communities.
So I believe that you're speaking of your BIA areas and your small businesses that currently receive municipal collection. So yes, it would be that we're not anticipating any change to that. That is, something that each municipality has their own criteria for BIAs and small businesses. So when we part of rolling out that, the town of Essex is not alone. All the municipalities have some BIA areas and have some small ICI collection. So obviously that would be discussions we have at that municipal working group of identifying who those who receives that benefit, as well as making sure that we're aligning to our goal is certainly not to be taking away service levels.
Mayor Shepley, Councillor Hammond.
To you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if you have any anticipated changes in volume as far as solid waste collection through once the organic waste is implemented. And I'm also wondering if the funding models also would affect the amount of volume that is collected through different funding models.
Bondi, I'm going to speak to it, but I might not know exactly where you're going. So just jump back around. So with the implementation of an organics program, initially the ramp up is fairly slow. We're looking at rolling them out first of all in the City of Windsor beginning in 2025, and then in the local municipalities upon the expiration of their current collection contracts. So the reason that being is municipalities have engaged with contractors, and any sort of revision to that contract opens the municipalities potentially up to risk, because that could be considered a material change in contract. So currently as well, the resolution of county council is in those urban settlement areas. So we do anticipate a decrease in typical residential waste volumes, but that will ramp up over time. And then with any change in programs, and I don't want to perceive anything, but if there was at some point a discussion regarding biweekly waste, bag limits, things of that's when you'd start to see a further ramp up of both the diversion efforts, so less material at the curb. Please follow up if I didn't.
Any further questions from members of council? I do have one, but I'm actually not sure if it's for you or for our director, Ms. Drusevich. I remember before, early on in my terms of council, I think Peter Timmons actually brought it forward where our farmland isn't always assessed garbage. Does that ring a bell? Director Drusevich?
Yes, we do have some farm properties that have chosen not to have garbage. They are marked garbage exempt. But it is open if they would want the service.
Thank you. I was just trying to process how, if it went to a county model, if they would, how the billing methods work, and then in theory, they would no longer be exempt. Just thinking about it. Okay, looking for a motion to receive the presentation from Michelle Bishop, General Manager of the Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority, David Sundin, County Solicitor, and Sandra Spears, Director of Finance Services and Treasurer. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor McGuire Blaze. Oh, and that, sorry, my apologies. And that council endorsed the concept of a regional approach to waste. It wasn't highlighted. No, I know. And that council endorsed the concept to a regional approach to waste management and direct administration to report back at a future council meeting with additional information on regional waste management program, including the County of Essex bylaw and the logistics of uploading the waste management services. So we did have Deputy Mayor and Councillor McGuire Blaze. Any questions to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously, I believe, was it? Yeah, okay. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Hammond, any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.